And now, Dr. Krieger's lecture program starts right now.
This is my daily protocol. These days with so many issues, so many problems, so many interactions with our environment, our body, this daily supplement program is what I use in my office. If somebody wants to do something daily, to make sure they get all their nutrients, that probably measures, if you were to measure it, it'd probably be 90 to 100 nutrients that you can get just doing this protocol, because vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, phytonutrients, nutraceuticals, all these things play a role in our health as we develop, as we age, as we get older. So this is a daily protocol I put together that I think suits a large number of the population for how many deficiencies we have out there, because we know that 90% of all diseases is related to deficiency. Okay? This is my web page. I always have some research up there. I'm going to have the lecture video starting. This is a temporary web page that I've been using for 4 or 5 years, so if that's a word temporary. But there's another web page going up probably in about 2 months that's different, that'll have a store on there, that'll have all kinds of stuff to keep up to date and to keep you knowledgeable on what's going on, or what your friends are doing, or stuff like that. Just everything that has to do with health, wellness, prevention, disease. Here's most of my lectures. My mom used to take me to the doctor all the time, because I had asthma and allergies growing up. I've had 3 sets of tubes put in my ears. I've seen allergists. I've been in a lot of doctors' waiting rooms, okay? So the worst thing I hate about going in a doctor's office is the sometimes hour wait. So I like to have an option. There's new patient forms so that they can bring in the forms and it can speed up the process. Not to say that you're going to get in right away, but at least you have your forms, you're ready, you sit down, you're not scrambling, the kids aren't running around with your pen when you're supposed to be filling the form out. I mean, it just gets a little chaotic. And I'm just trying to keep things clean, concise, and easy to follow. So those forms can be copied off the web page. Blood work. I've probably been doing blood work for about 8 years now, integrating it into the office from a nutritional standpoint, because there's a lot of blood work markers that you can use to figure out your nutritional status. Thyroid's a big one. Adrenal function's a big one. Lipid profiles. The urine analysis tells you a lot about what's going on in the urinary tract system and how you're metabolizing certain foods. Obviously sugars that we're going to talk about now is a big one that you always, glucose, A1C levels. So there's a lot you can look at with the blood work that I can give you a lot of knowledge, and also if you need to be referred out, you can be referred out. But most of what I do is in-house, and I have a good idea how to handle most of these situations that show up in blood work, because I've learned from good, knowledgeable doctors. Thermoscan. Thermoscan is something that I'm not going to say it's necessary, but it shouldn't be a #1 priority like it is on television. And when you hear a nurse talk, or they mention breast cancer, and you should think mammogram right away. People really don't know that mammograms have a cumulative effect on the body. And that effect on the body, every mammogram you have is like getting 21 chest x-rays. So if you're trying to prevent breast cancer, or trying to find if there's something going on within the breast, and it's very common, because breast cancer is very common these days, the mammography is not the tool of choice. because it creates cancer in itself. That's why they changed the recommendations to every 5 years instead of every 2 to 3 years getting mammograms, because they knew that they could be creating more and the risk and the benefit wasn't there. Okay? So remember, if I walked up to you and said, hi, I'm concerned, we need to get a breast cancer screening, I want to get a mammogram, we're going to be doing 21 chest x-rays on you, what would you say?
Oh, yeah.
No.
She'd immediately say no, because 21 x-rays is outlandish for this type of technology. We got so much better technology out there, and not to put you at risk. Another thing about, I usually recommend out of my office, I recommend the thermoscans, which is the infrared mammograms. If you want to look at this after, this is mammography. It measures, heat, vasculature areas, gives you a good scan, and it allows you to tell if there's any type of metabolic changes, because that's what you're looking at about, is metabolic changes. When you look at a mammogram, the research says that it takes about 50 million cells to be there before anything shows up. So when you see it, you're about 50 million cells behind. That's a lot. So the mammography will tell you, and the thermoscan will tell you if there's any metabolic changes, and there could be a lot of metabolic changes, but the biggest issue is finding out, if there's some vasculature thing going on in the breast, and they measure that, and the technology is getting better and better. And I'd rather you do that and pay out of your pocket. Nobody wants to pay anything out of their pocket. They think everybody's going to pay for them. Pay out of your pocket for some of this prevention. It'll last you a long time. That's why I'm up here, is because there's a lot of things you can do on your own. The more you're dependent, I think, on the medical system, the more you get stuck in the system. And everybody knows that. They've heard stories, but they're good for emergency situations. Emergency situations only, that's what I believe. And there's a lot of good doctors out there. So that's what I recommend out of the office's thermoscan. I played hockey my whole life. I remember getting hit. 2 pretty strong head traumas. Coming around the net with the puck, had my head down, and the guy just cleaned my clock. I still remember it. And this is a big issue. Concussions are a big issue. There's a lot of sports injuries, soccer, football, hockey, head traumas, accidents. The problem is I was listening to a show yesterday, and they said that after about 2 weeks of any type of concussion, you have a 20% of those people that had all the concussions, 20% of them are going to move on with neurological complications later in their life. It might be headaches, it might be dizziness. When you look at the brain is very soft like butter. And when it sits in that brain case, there's a lot of grooves where the nerves come up. There's a lot of shearing, and you could tear. There's a lot of things that can happen with neurological issues. In the office, your medical doctor does not know when you're ready to go back in the game. I was listening to the whole show, and I'm thinking, well, how do they know when to send your kid back in there? And there's 2 spots on this. They're on this side of the head, and they're called temporal reflexes. Whenever you have a concussion, that temporal reflex will blow. And when that temporal reflex blows, testing that reflex, that means that there's swelling on the brain or along the spinal cord. So when that tests, your treatment ain't done, and you're not ready to go back in the game. And then you can measure how bad an athlete is based on a sequence of how I grade the levels for how many pills you test for how bad it is. Your body asks for more pills when you're in more distress. Less pills, your body's handling it on its own. So nobody is doing this concussion reflex stuff. They got apparatuses around people's heads. In the NHL, they make you sit in a room. You're out that period and they just make you sit in a room. I mean, there's not a good criteria except for contact reflex analysis and telling if the brain is swollen, if there's swelling, when it's going away, and when you can go back in the game. That can all be measured out of my office with that technique. And nobody is doing that across the country. Before impact, initial impact, secondary impact. I mean, this is just not boxing. This is just not boxers. They're finding a lot of trauma to the brain. So you don't know if the swelling's in the back of the brain. You don't know if it's in the front. You don't know if it's on the top. I mean, you can't tell. There's an old, I took a class, it's called Psychoneuroimmunology at University of Connecticut. And in the textbook was a picture of a guy that worked on the railroad. And he had a railroad tie stuck up his nose. He fell on it, stuck up his nose into his brain, and he couldn't feel anything. Usually with signs and symptoms of concussion, dizziness, lightheadedness, headache, periods of nausea, possibly throwing up. I mean, there's all kinds of criteria, looking at the eyes and the dilation. But the point is, out of that whole picture, that picture was in there to tell you, you don't know, that person had something sticking in their brain, and they were walking around, and if you're walking around, it's probably maybe a stage 1 concussion. You know what I mean? That should have been a stage 3 or stage 4 concussion. That's pretty progressive. But there was no signs and symptoms. If he was behind the wall, he'd be talking, everything. Just how it hit and what it hit in the brain. Because the brain is a bulb of nerves. When you poke that brain, take the casing off, there's no nerves around that. There's no feeling. Okay? You know, there's so much misinformation out there. No salt, no fat. Don't eat your green vegetables because you're on Coumadin or you're on some blood thinner. You know, get out of the sun. What else is there?
No sugar.
Well, that's mine. You know, don't eat a hamburger because it causes global warming because of the carbon it's given off when you eat a hamburger. I mean, this is getting ridiculous out there. The point I'm trying to make is, you know, there's somebody that asked me, you know, if you're on cholesterol medication and you eat eggs. If you're on cholesterol medication and you're avoiding eggs, you're missing a huge part of your health and regeneration. The egg yolk is it's got 100% of all the nutrients you need. And they're going to tell you, because your cholesterol is high, that you shouldn't go on egg yolks. They did a study in the British Medical Journal. Somebody ate 28 eggs in 2 weeks. He couldn't change his cholesterol. That's because there's lecithin in there. There's all these other balanced nutrients to make sure that it doesn't raise cholesterol. It's a perfect food. So when your doctor tells you your cholesterol is high and don't eat eggs or eat the egg whites do not contain 100% of any nutrient. But the yolk contains 100% of all the nutrients. Pretty something. When they did a study, egg yolk protein showed a 25% or so increase in longitudinal, that's bone length growth, more than whey or casein. That's 25%. So if you're older and your knees are deteriorating and your shoulders are bothering you when you sleep at night and your neck cracks and pops and whistles, you're not getting enough protein because protein builds the joints. So, easy way is to add eggs into your diet, not just the egg yolk. Not the egg yolk, but the egg whites. Don't just eat egg beaters or egg whites. It's not worth it. It doesn't do the 25%. It doesn't restore your body. It doesn't help growth. I was impressed by this article. This was neat. Arsenic is not a huge issue, but it is an issue because molds, mildews, candida, fungal yeast, all that stuff, the waste byproduct of that is arsenic. There's a certain arsenic metabolic byproduct when you have a lot of that going on in your body. Well, if you look at this new study shows that when these cancer cells are placed near but not in contact with normal stem cells, the normal stem cells very rapidly acquire the characteristics of cancer stem cells. This is like has something to do with the electromagnetics of the charge of arsenic, probably. But they can just put it near the stem cells and it changes their behavior. Which is kind of interesting. Because everybody's like, well, you got to eat it, and you got to be toxic with it, and you got to work with wood, and you have to have your lawn sprayed, and you have to have all this stuff to happen. That's not necessarily the case. That's very interesting. That could be a metabolic byproduct from something else that's causing that, but that is very, very interesting. Hair analysis, I work out of the office. I work with doctors' data, which is a great forensic tool to determine heavy metals in the body. Any one of these can cause cancer. We know cadmium can cause cancer because it blocks a gene in the body called P52. And P52 is actually your guardian gene for your immune system. And it runs off of selenium. And anytime you have high cadmium levels, you suppress selenium. Aluminum actually stops the conduction of electricity. And then lead and mercury can cause cancer and neurological problems. This was kind of neat. Since we're talking about transplants, I picked up the newspaper. And this patient has Lou Gehrig's disease. It says in the article, was a wrestler, ran, did everything in high school, and all of a sudden he showed up with Lou Gehrig's disease where the muscles are starting to shut down his whole body, he can only move his head. Okay? The reason they printed this article here is because they're showing that U of M is doing a study. They're going to actually take stem cells from neural tissue and try to inject it into a spinal cord to start getting those motor neurons to get some communication so he can control his muscles. But this is what this is about, is stem cells and how nutrition can affect that. This was a female. What happened was she had tuberculosis and it damaged her throat, her trachea. And what they did was they grew a new trachea in the lab over 4 days. Took that trachea, took cells out of her body, put them on that trachea, and down here it says, since she used her own stem cells, there was no rejection from the trachea tube. That scares some people, but I think that's cool. This is a little, I wanted to go over this because this is a very hot topic. There's a lot of different branches. I don't want to misrepresent anybody else's branch, but I want to read the definition. Regenerative medicine is the process of replacing or regenerating human cells, tissues, or organs to restore or establish normal function. This field holds promise of regenerating damaged tissues and organs in the body by replacing damaged tissue and or by stimulating the body's own repair mechanisms to heal previously irreparable tissues or organs. That's where I stand, okay? I'm not doing any funny stuff in the basement. I'm not taking anybody's, stem cells from their lip or their olfactory nerve or anything like that, but I'm trying to use nutrition to stimulate the body's own repair mechanisms to heal the tissues. And I'm going to show you that it can be done. And it's kind of cool, because you don't have to grow your cells in a lab, and there are certain situations where you want to do that. But there's also certain situations where it needs to be economical, and it needs to be easy, and it can be something that you can do, in the privacy of your own home to help your disease or your condition. This is how life starts. This is embryology. This is how life starts. It starts with a zygote. It's kind of interesting. A sperm and an egg. Two haploids, sperm, egg, meet for one diploid, they call it, and it's a zygote. And that zygote starts to produce the cells, the 23 chromosomes, and from the sperm and the 23 from the egg, and they start to make 8-cell stage. And then what happens is probably after the 5th or 6th day, you got over 100 cells, and they're called a blastula. And then these blastula, these 100 cells, start to get organized. There's a whole plan, and that organization is based on what it is. So there's a definite miraculous, specific design. I'm not a chaos person. There's people that believe in chaos, that things just happen because eventually it's going to happen anyway. But this is a planned stage. But once this goes from the blastula into that stage there with all the 100 cells, now you start getting inside layer, outside layer, around. This outside layer is our CNS or our epidermis, which is our skin. That's our central nervous system. This middle layer is muscles, bones, dermis, and the cardiovascular system. Endoderm is the lining of the gut and airway. Okay? So these are the levels here. That's where everything comes from. Very simple, but very complex. Here's the blastocyst, and then you have the separation of the layers, inside, middle, outer layer, and then here's a little pictorial here of skin cells for the ectoderm of the epidermis, and then you have, in the ectoderm, you have neurons up in the brain, and then you have the pigment cells, which are your melanocytes. That's the sperm and the egg, that happened way before. And then you have the mesoderm. Here's cardiac muscle, skeletal muscle, kidney, red blood cell, smooth muscle. And then you have the inner inside layer, which is the lining, it's the inside layer, but it's really the outside of the body because it protects you from the outside. It's the lung, the thyroid, and the pancreas. Here's a little pictorial of the ectoderm, just so you can see how things are arranged, but it's mostly nervous system. This is mostly muscles, tendons, ligaments. And then you have the endoderm, which has a lot to do with the thyroid, the thymus, the pancreas, the liver, the epithelial lining of the digestive tract, all that. Here's a little picture of some of the tissues and how they divide out and separate out. Brain, neuro, heart, cardiac, and then your bone marrow. Now, the biggest thing is we're not going to get into embryonic stem cells because it's too political, there's too many problems, we don't want to deal with embryos. But adult stem cells is actually where all the hype is and where there's been some big breakthroughs. Adult stem cells are undifferentiated cells. So they're almost like they're a blank cell, and when the body calls on it, for whatever reason, that blank cell turns into a specific tissue that it needs, which is kind of cool. It says it's found throughout the body after development that multiply by cell division to replenish dying cells and regenerate damaged tissue. They're also called somatic stem cells, which are body cells. Okay? They can be found in young as well as adult animals and human bodies. Scientific interest in adult stem cells is centered around their ability to divide or self-renew indefinitely and generate all cell types organ from which they originate, potentially regenerating the entire organ from a few cells. Embryonic stem cells, the use of adult stem, unlike embryonic stem cells, the use of adult stem cells in research is not considered controversial. They have mainly been studied in humans, models, and organisms as mice and rats. Adult stem cells come from, sometimes they tell you now you can collect your umbilical cord now and freeze it when you have your kids, just in case they come up with a cure to use your own cells to fix something if something's wrong with your child as he grows older. That's where this is all coming from. Body tissues in adults and children, from the moment we're born, stem cells are present within virtually all tissues and organ systems. So, just like we have renewable energy, we have renewable cells. But there's a process that we have to go through to allow the stem cells to renew or to activate correctly, because they can be activated incorrectly, like the example I gave you with arsenic. Adult stem cells are a natural solution. They naturally exist in our bodies, and they provide a natural repair mechanism for many tissues of the body. They belong in a microenvironment of an adult body, while embryonic stem cells belong in the microenvironment of an early embryo, not in an adult body. It's very, very important, where they tend to cause tumors and immune system reactions. What are stem cells, adult stem cells? They are capable of dividing and replacing damaged tissue, and they exist in tissues such as bone marrow, brain, muscle, and fat. Unlike neighbors, which are already differentiated means they're already a certain unique characteristic tissue. Unlike neighbors, which are already differentiated into specialized cell types, adult stem cells remain immature. They're like extra seeds, you can put away in case the crop gets destroyed. If you are a stem cell, you are either an embryo or an adult. There's no in between. It's kind of interesting. Stem cells in the bone marrow and the blood. There's blood stem cells, which are called hemopoietic stem cells. There's stromal cells, which are in the bone marrow that make most of the mesoderm, which is the muscle tissue, cardiac tissue, tendons, ligaments. And then you have your endothelial progenitor cells. Those are the ones that line your vascular system. Those we're going to go through and find out how important those are. In other tissues, endothelial progenitor cells, skeletal epithelial cells, which are skin, digestive cells, and then you've got stem cells for the pancreas and the liver. Here's a basic description of, I don't expect you to follow all this, but I want you to get the concept that there's great opportunity in activating your stem cells using nutrition, nutraceuticals, herbals that I don't think people are aware of in the public, and that's what my business is about. That's blood stem cells in the bone marrow that make blood cell types. I'll show you a graph of that. Here's breast stem cells. Provide source of cells for growth of the mammary gland during puberty and gestation. Intestinal stem cells. Mesenchymal is your Mesenchymal is your body stem cells or soma stem cells. Here's the endothelial stem cells that line the lining of the vascular system. Olfaction stem cells, which the olfactory nerve is one of the oldest primitive nerves we have in our whole body. It's kind of interesting because you can actually go into the nasal cavity and you can get embryonic stem cells, not adult stem cells, but embryonic stem cells, which is kind of interesting. And then the neurocrest stem cells are the ones that I'm interested in for growing my hair back. And that also has to do with gastrointestinal tract, there's sciatic nerve, there's neurocrest stem cells all over the body. The biggest ones that I want to talk about are the bone marrow that contain the hemopoiesis, which are your blood stem cells. You have your blood. The blood is the life, the blood is where it's at. Okay? And it has plasticity. That means that blood stem cells can change into other tissue stem cells, even though they're blood stem cells. So they serve the rest of the body. Stem cells are in the marrow like we talked about, and there's certain stem cells that can change and turn into other stem cells. They call them multipotent. That means they can take on maybe 4 or 5 different tissue lines, and they're totally something else. It's kind of interesting, so they transform. So we do have some transformers. Everybody see a Transformer movie? This is a case of transformation in body. And then we have neural tissue, cardiomyocytes, and then we have liver from bone marrow stem cells. I'll show you a picture. This is a quick way. People are like, well, how do they figure all this stuff out? Well, CD34, CD45, and CD133 are all genetic markers for these specific cells. So CD34 and CD45, those ones are tags for actual hemopoietic or blood cells. And I'll show you the blood cells of all the ones that are in the body and how they divide. Okay? So if you measure CD34 or CD45 or CD133 and they're low, there's a possibility that your health is in jeopardy. A strong possibility because your regenerative ability is not there. It's more on the degenerative side. Here's the blood cell lineage or the hemopoietic cells. These are, you take a hemopoietic cell, it becomes an erythrocyte, which is a blood cell. It becomes a neutrophil, a basophil. It becomes a macrophage. You know, all these different cells do different things in the immune system. That's why different people, you ever hear of blood cancers, leukemias? This is our leukemia board. So if there's something wrong in this, maybe you're producing too many, white blood cells. Maybe you have CML or chronic myelolytic lymphocyte, lymphocytes. Leukemia is there's all kinds of different leukemias, but I'm going to show you something that has the ability to support this whole blood lineage, and it's pretty neat. Here's the specific gene expression, how they track them. This is CD34, that's your hemopoietic stem cells. Now, chemotherapy, radiation are toxic treatments to the body, okay? Their success rate, some would argue, but if you add up all the statistics, it's about 9% for cancer, okay? And it's not probably from the cancer itself, but it's when you destroy the immune system, it's hard for it to kind of come back because you destroyed the hemopoietic stem cells from the radiation and the chemo. So you poison the patient. So I'm going to show you a way that's easy that if any cancer patient, depending on the cancer, you got to use some discretion, but you can actually give them something to support their immune system so they don't destroy their immune system And I'll give you the answer just in a little bit, which is very important. I mean, you know, you don't go into battle, I don't care what your doctor or your nurse says, you never go into battle without any armor or without any weaponry. I mean, it's pretty commonsensical. You're not going to walk you're not going to walk on the battlefield naked and be like, oh, let's go. You know, it just doesn't work that way. But that's what they're doing with the radiation and chemo. And we act like, oh, we can't do that. It's going to affect the radiation and the chemo. But you're going to destroy your immune system too. You got to make a choice. So there's better ways to do things along with that, because there is some beneficial. They get 90%. This is from the bone marrow. These are all the different, that's why the bone marrow is so important in the body. That's why they've been doing, you know, bone marrow grafts and stuff like that for almost 40 years. Taking cells out of your bone marrow for leukemias and all kinds of different things. But you have the ability to divide these cells by things that you take. We talked about that. Now, back to this. I want to just mention this one more time because this is important. Adult stem cells can differentiate into developmentally unrelated cells. So if I'm a bone cell, I have the possibility of becoming a muscle cell or a blood cell. So it's the transformation thing. It says neural stem cells produce myeloid and lymph cells as well as blood cells, which is kind of cool. They're all buddies. They're buddy-buddy in the system. Stem cells from mouse muscle could repopulate the blood and rescue lethally irradiated mice. That's why when they, you know, give you too much radiation or give you too much chemo, poison you, you don't die right away. It's a slow, your body's trying to catch up. Bone marrow stem cells can become brain cells in liver. That's huge for Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, for dementia. I mean, that's huge. Plus heart, skeletal, and smooth muscle from bone marrow. These are all the locations of where these cells hang out. They could be anywhere in the body, but they find them when they study it. Hemopoietic are mostly in the yolk sac, the fetal liver, the spleen, the bone marrow, circulating in the umbilical cord. They're in the blood. They're in the liver. They're in the intestine, the crypt area of the intestine. The epidermal, they're in the basal layer of the epidermal. Pancreas are in the pancreatic islets, and mesenchymal are in the bone marrow and the fat tissue. This is mesenchymal, everything from the bone. This all divides here, and it comes to become bone, cartilage, muscle, stromal, tendons, connective tissue. And that's very important because depending on what you need and what you use, if you need more cartilage, you might want to do something to turn on the cartilage stem cells. Okay? And your body knows what you need because it's got a nervous system that's always relaying it. So a lot of times we don't even need to go there and just put it in that area and it goes, because any cell can become any cell. Not all of them, but most of them. So I'll show you something neat at the end. How to boost and improve the growth of stem cells. The pharmaceutical industry has made strides in developing some chemicals that affect the stem cell stimulation, but once again, despite the positive effects, we have all kinds of unwanted side effects. Strokes, fever, body pain, breathing, headaches. I mean, they're headaches for most of your doctors and scientists, and the effectiveness of these drugs are only short-term. They've never been studied long-term, okay? However, herbal extracts derived from plants have only slight or no side effects and showed strong scientific validity in the same area as drugs they use now for stem cell function. Exact same, I'm going to show you. Remember I said those, the endothelial progenitor cells, you measure the CD34 and the CD133? Well, they found that The tests right now are not that accurate that these stem cells and how much you measure in your body tell you how healthy you are. Now they're saying, well, wait, this is a little bit more accurate of what we conventionally look at. So stem cells that reside in the adult bone marrow or circulate, endothelial cells have markers, those are the two markers, and endothelial cells decrease with age and are a measure of vascular senescence and a biomarker of aging, how well your vascular system's doing. Here's things that increase your endothelial progenitor cells is exercise. Hormone balance is huge. Estrogen and progesterone levels, your vitamin D levels directly affect your EPCs or your endothelial protective cells, or progenitor cells you should call them. Astragalus is a huge one. There's a chemical in astragalus that works real well. It's called TA65 that actually slows down the aging process. Growth hormone is huge. I mean, if you want to, the problem is in America we have 60 million pre-diabetics. I mean, that is huge. If you know anything about diabetes, it's basically an insulin problem. We're stimulating insulin too much. And we used to have a number at 146 for the blood level of glucose in the blood. That was the measurement for diabetes. Now they moved it down to 126. But even 126 is too high. They're finding that it needs to be 90 or below, because what happens is every diabetic I know and all the ones in the research age very aggressively. Sugar abnormal regulation is the biggest cause of degeneration in America today, because sugar is not an anabolic factor. How many grams of sugar do we need to live every day? 0. There you go. I never learned that in nutrition class. I learned fat and salt was bad for you, but I never learned that you don't need no carbohydrates are essential. Which is kind of interesting. That's a big factor, you know. It's a big secret to hide from everybody. So, abnormal sugar regulation, when insulin goes up, growth hormone goes down. What's the first thing we do when we have an appetite? We go and eat. We don't know what we're eating for. We're eating because maybe somebody yelled at us on the highway, or your husband or your wife, or, you know, we're eating, and we're really, we're eating more for, you know, in the head than in the stomach. But the point is that the sugar regulation is a major shutdown process, and it causes a lot of degeneration. No more growth hormone, no more testosterone, no more insulin growth factor 1. I'm going to go through it real quick. So you can't be in a build-up mode and be on a lot of carbohydrates. You're going to catch up and you're going to start to degenerate. Your tissues are going to degenerate. Your body's going to start to degenerate. It just can't handle the 60 to 70% carbohydrates we have in our diet. If none of them are essential, why are they so high? So I'm not a, avoid all sugar, don't eat, I'm 15 to 25% carbohydrates unless you're one of these Olympic athletes and, you're running a long time, more than 10 miles. Because then you might need it. This was interesting. With these EPCs or endothelial progenitor cells, high cholesterol actually changes the circulation. What causes high cholesterol?
Fat. Sugar. Too many carbohydrates.
Eggs?
Food.
No.
Too many carbohydrates.
Insulin resistance or too many carbohydrates actually activates the pathway in the liver to produce excess cholesterol. So there are genetic differences There's like 5 of them, but 2 of them have to do with insulin resistance in the majority of the population. So, diabetes, insulin resistance, reduces the EPC number, impairs EPCs, which are, you can produce them, but what happens if you produce something and you can't get to the factory or bring it to the store and sell it? You're in trouble. So you can produce all you want, but you're only as good as how much you produce and how much your carrying capacity is. Hypertension, biggest cause of hypertension? I put the answer on the side. Insulin resistance.
Okay.
Constriction of the renal arteries. Insulin resistance is a major cause of hypertension and blood pressure problems. Smoking does not relate to insulin resistance, but it does relate to people that have highs and lows in their blood sugar. They're mostly your diabetics, drug addicts, smokers. They're addicted to something because their blood sugar is all messed up. So it is related, but indirectly. Aging, they know anytime that you regulate the insulin gene, fruit flies, not that it matters, but mice, anything with insulin, they regulate it, they always live longer and a lot longer. That's where the big, SERT gene, they call it the SERT gene with red wine when you have red wine. And there's a chemical in red wine that actually can slow down aging because it allows you to be in calorie restriction, where you're not turning on all those catabolic hormones. It actually mimics calorie restriction in your body. There's exercise. Exercise is a big one for not only increasing, but also for circulation. High endothelial progenitor cells, when they studied it, means 70% less death from cardiovascular causes. That's big. What are the ones that are big that stimulate these cells? Blueberry is a big one. Green tea is a huge one. Vitamin D is a huge one. Now, everybody says, well, I already take a vitamin D supplement. Listen, Paula, she got her blood work. She keeps up on her health. She got her blood work, and what's your vitamin D, Paula?
Yeah, I don't know.
Like in the 15s?
Yeah, it was up there.
I had a patient come in 2 weeks ago, and they were at 9 on their vitamin D. They're supposed to be like 58, 60, if that's where I want them to be. The other doctors, they probably want to be at 35. But when they did a study out in California, because the sun shines everywhere out in California and every day, I'm not going to go into that, but when they tested a group of people, they found that in the average, a quarter of the people they tested, even though they had enough sun every day, didn't get enough vitamin D. So they were bad converters because of genes. So just because you're in the sun, don't mean it's not a problem. That's why you always want to get your vitamin D levels checked. And then carnosine is a big one. It helps break down sugars, again, cataracts, helps with genetics. Here's some nutraceuticals that augment circulating endothelial progenitor cells. Green tea is a big one. In my Vitanox, astragalus. I use bilberry. Bilberry is excellent for circulating EPCs. They found goji berries. And then lactobacillus fermentum, which is your good bacteria, does a good job of that. And algic acid. And then the beta-1,3-glucan, which is your Ganoderma shiitake mushroom. And then again, vitamin D3. So those are your main ones. I love putting this up because this just tells us we are so backwards in our healthcare system. These are all vitamin D issues right over here. Most people don't think of it, oh, it's just a deficiency. I already get enough. It says fractures, cancer, influenza, other respiratory, septicemia, that's infection in the blood, MS, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, congestive heart failure, All those are related to vitamin D. Why? Because of the stem cells. If they change this and just implemented following this, because in Texas I think it's mandatory, if you go to a hospital you have to get your vitamin D level checked. For some reason they're up on top of things, I don't know why, but Michigan should be up on top of it. I mean, we only see only 165 days of sunlight in Michigan. And some of those probably are cloudy days. So with the healthcare costs spiraling out of control and doing this, there's so many little things the public can do, but the cost savings in the billions, these are all billions. Fractures, cost savings, you could save about 6 billion. 25 billion, you could save 6 billion just making sure everybody's vitamin D is correct. And you're knowledgeable on what vitamin D does. Cancer is a huge one. Look at how high that was. They don't want anything to get near their cancer stuff. $219 billion, cancer industry. They don't want anybody talking about stem cells. They don't want anybody talking about nutrition. Nothing to stimulate hemopoietic cells because they all got it over there. Influenza is a big one. What was the highest one? It was a pretty high one. MS was high for vitamin D. But that all just tells you you can't run your immune system without fat-soluble vitamins. Vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. The point was, Paula went back and got her blood work, and you were in the normal range, right?
Oh, yeah.
She was in the normal range. So she said to me, should I stop it? I said, absolutely not. You have to stay on it until we see your next blood work. I want to make sure. How much were you taking? You were at 100. Were you at 100?
Yeah, it was up there.
She was at 100.
I think I took a drop or 2 drops a day, maybe.
Yeah, and she was at 100. And usually at 100, wow, that's too much. Most medical doctors say, no, you look at the calcium level. If the calcium level is still low, she's got a lot of rebuilding to go. We got to keep it up there for a little while. But once that calcium pops up there, you drop it down. So I always look at the vitamin D, not at the measurements they give you. I always watch the calcium when you get the blood work. Because you might need more than I do. Because your bones might be a little bit more porous. There might be a genetic issue. There might be something else going on. So these are just averages. All right. Combination of nutrients produce a synergistic effect to promote proliferation of human blood cells. Nutrients can act to promote healing by an interaction with stem cell populations. This is our first one here. When we know the signaling paths, we can copy them in test tubes. They want everything in a test tube. This, in time, converts stem cells to beta cells, says Professor Sura. The new researchers' results were obtained from all these different international. They're trying to grow it in a test tube. Okay? Watch this. 1983. Genema regulates blood sugars in normal rats, but a significant reduction for rats with high sugars. Okay? 1986. Genema corrected the hyperglycemia in mild Aloxan diabetics. They induced diabetes in these rats. They prolonged their lifespan in severe diabetes. That means that was changing how those sugars were changing the aging process in the body. In a Japanese study, 28 days of Genema reduced postprandial serum glucose after you eat. Knocked your sugar down. That was in 1990. 1986, the enhancement of endogenous insulin production, possibly by pancreatic regeneration. There's people that have diabetes and they don't even know it because you don't feel anything. It's the worst treating diabetes. I thought it was going to be wonderful because I have all the answers. Most of them. But I thought it was going to be fun. They don't feel anything. You don't feel your nerves when you get a little bit of neuropathy. Until you step into a hot tub and you don't realize that you just burn yourself and it wasn't, it wasn't cool water, it was hot water. Or you start creating sugar on your lens. Or your kidneys start to give out, hypertension, all those things because of dysregulation of sugar. You don't feel any of this, but it's happening. This was just released January. They printed it in March 2012 this year. It says, anti-diabetic effects of Gymnema sylvestre extract from streptococcus-induced diabetic rats, possible B-cell protective and regenerative evaluation. Okay? Now I want to show you this. This was the experimental design. They took a group of animals, normal saline, normal, you got to test all the different angles, normal rats, 400 milligrams of Gymnema, because I wanted to make sure, hey, if we give this to somebody, if we misdiagnose somebody and we give this to somebody, is something going to happen? So we want to find out. Diabetic rats with septicemia, 50 milligrams, and then diabetic rat with 200 milligrams, and then the diabetic rat with 400 milligrams. That's your fifth group. And then diabetic rat with insulin. This is the one how they treat right now. Okay? There's the days up there. Here's our fifth. So on day one, when they gave the rat that had saline and nothing else, everything was normal, nothing changed. Second one, nothing changed, everything was normal. Third one, induced diabetes, stayed the same all the way through. Fourth one, induced diabetes, gave them 200 milligrams a kilogram of the Gymnema sylvestre, went from 339 all the way to 185. Then, adding an extra 200, now you're at 400 milligrams a kilogram. They went from 345 all the way to 112 in just 40 days. And then this one here was the insulin one, 325 all the way to 88. So, in just a little over a month, they changed those levels. This is the normal pancreatic islets where your insulin is released from. And those normal pancreatic islets, when they damage those tissues, this is the one, it gets all thickened. This is actually where the insulin is produced. It's the beta cell. And what happens is, it starts getting striated and start breaking up those cells. And that's normal. See this big one right here? See how nice that one is? Those are all the beta cells that are producing the insulin. Pancreas treated by, and now these pictures are not made up. They took this right out of the journal. Treated by Gymnema sylvestre at a dose of 400. This is what it looked like. Narrow, not too bad. Filled right in. So it actually, regenerated your pancreas. This is what they said about it. They said because it has regenerating ability of beta cells, at least people in the earliest stages of the disease could be treated to delay or prevent full-blown clinical diabetes. Are you kidding me? If you're a diabetic, you're on this. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It says Gymnema sylvestre possessed hypoglycemic, hypolipidemic, which it changed cholesterol, changed triglycerides. I mean, it kind of cleaned up everything. In long-term treatment, is also capable of regenerating the beta cells, and hence it could be used as a drug for treating diabetes. I don't think they're going to take Gymnema, tear it apart, take one or two chemicals out of there, and have the same results as the synergistic herb that you're taking. It's not going to happen. You can't take your team and just use your quarterback and not let the rest of the team on the field. You ain't going to win. You might get a little benefit, but you're not going to get the full benefit. You start tearing things apart. Let's go here. This is what I use. This is the Genema, the 4 grams, and then I use the Cataplex GTF to feed the pancreas and hate that. When the sugar is there, now you want to make sure it moves correctly. I'm not going to do anything with that. Now, this is ginseng. This is Korean ginseng. Anybody heard of Korean ginseng?
You explain that to us. Oh,
Korean ginseng is an herb. They've used this herb for thousands of years. It's an anti-aging treatment that they just use. They're like, hey, you know what? I want some anti-aging. I'm just going to take this. They pick something and they just take it. They don't have any research or anything to back it up, but they just know it does something for me and I like it. Well, this Korean ginseng are called Panax ginseng. C.A. Myers did all the research on this type of ginseng. And what they found was there's different chemicals in ginseng, the Panax ginseng or the Korean ginseng. There's different, or ginseng, there's different ones. There's like 8 different ones. This one's the Korean, not the Siberian, which is the Lithococcus. This is the Korean ginseng. So there's a chemical in Korean ginseng called Domarin saphogenins. And they actually stimulate fibroblasts, and fibroblasts are important for synthesizing collagen. How many people have saggy, stretched skin? It's part of the aging process. But this chemical in ginseng, among other things that are in there, stimulates the stem cells to produce new collagen. Here's another one. Domarin saphogenins can enhance the skin's ability to resist the abuse of the notorious substance like oxygen radicals and ultraviolet rays. What do you think should replace? What do you think we should put in place? What are the sunscreen sunblocks? I mean, it protects you from ultraviolet and oxygen radicals. They got you on, oh man, there's all kinds. There's PABA in there, and aluminum and silver, and it's just all crap to reflect the light. That's it. Terrible stuff for you. Then here's the other one. Domarin saphogenins from ginseng stimulate endothelial progenitor cells. Now it's on the fibroblasts. It's protecting your skin. It protects the lining of your vascular system so that you can regenerate your vascular system quicker. It also is found that it stimulates the bone cells. Remember the body of the cells, the stromal cells? Those are the mesenchymal stem cells into heart. The biggest problem with medicine right now is, well, they're fixing because they're growing things in the test tube and stuff like that, but the biggest problem is when somebody has a heart attack, you could have 25% damage, you could have 30%, or maybe 50%. What happens is immediately your body attacks that, goes after and lays down fibrin or fibroblasts. Okay? Problem is there's no activation of these mesenchymal cells. There's not enough of it because there's only a certain amount of adult stem cells. That's why you got to take something to do something. But when they added this chemical out of ginseng, the cardiac cells regenerated. It indicates that there's a significant role in the treatment of myocardial injury due to acute myocardial infarction, that's a heart attack, or inflammation, and improve the prognosis of patients afflicted by these diseases. You think if you had a heart issue or vascular issue, you think you want to be on like Korean ginseng? I mean, they act like, this stuff is so bad, it's not regulated, and all this stuff. All you do, you know exactly how much to take. I give you all the information. I got an herbal degree. If you didn't know that, I studied herbs, I got an herbal degree, and there's some cool pharmacology that comes out of herbals. Almost 30 to 40% of all the drugs in the market are from herbals. So it's pretty cool. Here's another one. Not only did that chemical do contractile cells, endothelial progenitor cells, fibroblasts, but it also stimulated blood cells, which can turn into anything. Tamarian sapogens improved the growth of nerve cells up in the brain. I mean, that's, if I had Alzheimer's, or I had Parkinson's, or I had some type of neurological problem, or I had some type of concussion injury where the nerves were damaged, why wouldn't I want to promote the neural growth of stem cells? Here's another picture of how the blood divides, but the Korean ginseng stimulates all that to happen, which is kind of cool. It mimics a drug in medicine called CSF, which is colony stimulating factor. Granulocyte macrophage colony stimulating factor, that's what it does. Here's the blood cells. Now, if you read the bottom here, it says that sapogens also exhibit stimulatory effects on neurosphere stem cells and induce latter to differentiate into neurons, astrocytes, which are up in the brain. You ever hear of astrocytomas? Glial cells, and cerebral function that can be therefore restored. It's regenerating all cells in the brain. The stimulatory effect of Tamarian sapogens on neural stem cells is regarded to have significant. You gotta look for significant. It's kind of like regenerative. I look for the word regenerative in there. It's preventative in its treatment of Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's. It also plays a role in memory improvement and aging retardation. This is the stem cell. This is the neural stem cell, and that neural stem cell actually creates a neuron, and then here's another type of neural cell, and then here's another type of neural cell. I learned in school that there's nothing you can do. Like 15 years ago, you got the peripheral nervous system and you got the central nervous system. If something happens in the central nervous system, you're just out of luck, which has to do with the brain and the spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system has to do everything that comes off the brain and the spinal cord, like the cranial nerves and all the peripheral nerves that come out of the spine. So they told you, yeah, PNS, which is peripheral nervous system, yeah, you might not be able to do much. You can do a little bit. The central nervous system, we couldn't. But now everything's being flipped. So it's kind of like no salt, no sugar, no egg yolk, no whatever, no sun. Here's another chemical that's actually in ginseng, because there's a bunch of them in there. But this one actually stimulates a growth factor to repair and regenerate called brain-derived neurotrophic factor up in the brain. So it's stimulating a growth factor in the brain to say, hey, grow, nerve, grow. That's in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology. Okay, we're done with that. So the saphins, which are the different chemicals in the Korean ginseng, also help with neurogenesis. So if anybody's had a stroke, that's a definite possibility for them. This one was interesting. It said that it improved neurological deficits and cerebral ischemia. Anybody know what cerebral ischemia is? That's no oxygen. Ischemia is no oxygen, so brain without no oxygen. So, drowned victims can benefit from this. I actually had I saw a drowned victim. She was on a feeding tube, and I put her on a pill which has the Korean ginseng in it. It's my failure to thrive pill. That's what I call it, because it builds the blood, like Korean ginseng. It builds the blood, it builds the fibroblasts, it builds everything up. And she was able to get off her feeding tube in probably 3 months. I don't know if it was from the pill But everything was right to give it to her because I knew what was behind it. And it ended up working out for her. She got off a huge feeding tube. They were paid, $65,000, $70,000 a year feeding tube. So this is these are the different things that have Korean ginseng. There's one other one, or there's two other ones that I didn't put on here. But Withania complex is a big one. That's a huge one for the adrenals. Korean ginseng, that's the liquid. That's the one that's the strongest in the alcohol. And then Herbal Vite is my all-around anti-aging. It's in there too. That's why they put it in there, because of all this research. Fractures, real quick, let's go into fractures, because there's something interesting I want to show you. Osteoporotic fractures is huge. Everybody knows that you can't be on Prempro or Premarin or all that stuff. That's what they're on because of the porosing, because they say estrogen deficiency, you have problems not being able to get osteoblasts to grow bone. You got to be able to grow bone. The problem is you grow a little bone, now you end up with breast cancer, you have a stroke, you have a clot, you have a heart attack. So there's got to be different ways to do this. There's got to be different ways to look at these things. This was osteoporosis and low bone density in the United States. I couldn't believe these two. I don't know why this is, but more than 60% for osteoporosis. These were less than 30 along here. Now this was 40, this was 50 or 60, so it's probably not all vitamin D. Some of it is, but there's some going on. Here's osteoporosis. I like how they explain this. Here's osteoporosis general. Here's the disuse, because thyroid medication can cause osteoporosis. Get that thyroid going too fast, you can tear down bone. So, taking thyroid medication in the summer is not the same as taking the same dosage in the winter. They're totally different. Other drug-induced senile osteoporosis, they don't talk. There's nothing on diet. There's nothing on hydrochloric acid insufficiency. There's nothing on lack of protein. I mean, the quickest way to move calcium is sugar. Extra protein does not move calcium. You need a high level of protein. There's a threshold point where when you get enough protein, then you can start losing a little bit of calcium. But protein fortifies growth hormone, which fortifies bone structure. This was neat. This is a cool one. Real quick, Herba epimendi, which is an herbal that's used for osteoporosis. It's kind of cool. It was a Chinese herb, and what they found was that it stimulated BMP, which has to do with getting the mesenchymal cells from the bone marrow that we talked about to produce bone. It's actually a flavonoid. I'll show you real quick here. It's called Icariin flavonoid. Icariin flavonoid is actually an estrogen derivative. And that Icariin flavonoid is very important because estrogen not only can help a little bit with the bone density, but it causes all kinds of other havoc in the body. This one, this flavonoid, which is different estrogen, it's the one that your body can recognize and get out, actually was better, and it exerted no hyperplasia on the endometrium, meaning no uterine cancer, which is kind of cool. So one, it's called Icariin flavonoid for bone loss, is very important with postmenopausal, and it's not Boniva, doesn't cause jaw rot, doesn't cause all these other problems. It activates certain stem cells, and it does it gently and easily. It says beneficial effect on preventing bone loss in late postmenopausal women without resulting in cancer. It's really, get to the point. This is the bone complex that it's in. And I want to show you something. The American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons projects 673% in total knee replacements, and a 174% increase in first-time total hip replacements by 2030. We are falling apart, literally. It ain't more trauma. It's a bunch of crap. It's because our bodies aren't being fed right and we can't regenerate. One of the ways that I induce growth in the body, I use insulin growth factor. Growth factor around fetal development is huge. There's a high number when you measure. It's called somatomedin C. It's not insulin, it's like insulin, but it's insulin growth factor 1, and it helps the development. You know, I watched a show on building of the World Trade Center. It was kind of neat. And they had a problem because the cement that they pour into to make the levels, that by the time they brought it from the place to the Trade Center, the cement wasn't set right. The conditions weren't right because it was too far of a drive. They got to get the conditions correct so it doesn't, break and all that stuff and chip and all that, which was kind of interesting. It's the same thing in the body. When you want something to grow, you have to have some growth factors in there. That's why sugar, insulin, diabetes, all those things create havoc on anabolic hormones or growth hormones in the body. Sugar is the biggest cause. They haven't come out with this yet, but they've already said in the research is the biggest cause of trigger finger, spurs in the neck, spurs in the back, bone degeneration. It's all based on insulin. And they got you eating 70% of it every day. It's amazing the body can keep up with that. Real quick, this was kind of cool, taking responsibility. I love to put women on 7-Ketozyme. It helps with their sex drive. It helps with their moods. They have more of a peace of mind. Men, you could be a little bit more abrupt and give them something different, but 7-Ketozyme works good. I put 7-Ketozyme, which is by IGF-1. It only stimulates it probably about 10%. Increases IGF like 10%. We don't want to increase it like huge. But if we want to grow something or do something. So I put women on for the joints and all that. I'll put them on the Ketozyme with the cytozyme trachea or with another glandular that you want to try to grow, right? You want to tell your body, hey, this is the gland you want to grow. These are the growth factors. Get to work. That's what's going on. That's what the research is showing. These are the things that actually, if you don't have the Ketozyme or the insulin growth factor 1, drinking suppresses insulin growth factor 1. Birth control pills, cortisol, lack of exercise, low thyroid, and obesity. That's why that 7-Ketozyme is another name for DHEA. Okay? I think if you use 7-Ketozyme, you get less, because with DHEA, there's certain pathways it can follow. You're forcing it down one certain pathway with 7-Ketozyme where it can't go in another pathway. So it's a downstream product that I think Biox did an excellent job on. Here's over 2,500 published papers that reveal the benefits of the 7-Ketozyme or DHEA. Glucose levels, masculinity, muscularity, healing, regenerative, platelets from stacking, that's thin blood, lower LDLs and cholesterol, supports the immune system. That's what it looks like. If men take it, I don't like to use it on them, but if they do, I don't give them over 50 milligrams because then you got to check the blood work. Sometimes they can convert to estrogen. Get the pot bellies. Not that they're not drinking beer anyway. And then, this is a big one. I mean, hypochlorhydria is huge in America. Hypochlorhydria is just low hydrochloric acid. Something so simple can cause so much dysfunction in the body. These are all the things it causes, but what does a high carbohydrate diet do? It lowers thiamine and it lowers zinc. What do you need to make hydrochloric acid? Thiamine and zinc. So if you're on a 70% carbohydrate diet, you don't have enough thiamine, and you don't have enough zinc, and the rest is ammonium chloride to make hydrochloric acid. So when you're on a high carbohydrate diet, you will eventually be hypochlorhydric. Osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, osteoporosis, that's how it all leads. Your digestion's messed up. Here's some examples of degeneration. That turned out horrible. This one right here, this disc right here, you can see these are, I thought they were turn out better than this. Well, you can see, this was kind of interesting. Look at the size of this joint here. Look at how clean this one looks. See how that one's all monkeyed up? That's a patient that hurt his back, but he had gout. And when he hurt his hip, he never knew it. And he didn't know he had gout either, because most people don't know. You see that guy that carries around that Vascon, that commercial? You don't know you have gout until it spills over. You can have all the symptoms and it won't show up on the blood work until it shows up in the blood. So you could be 80% full uric acid in the extracellular tissue being spilled over. Oh, my joints are killing me. What the heck's going on? Inflammation in the joints because of the uric acid, and your blood work is below 5 on the gout, uric acid. Your uric acid is low, and you're like, what's going on here? So a lot of times the blood work won't tell you either. You got to kind of think. But I asked him, I said, well, you got any conditions in your family or anything? Because this one's that's a hell of a joint. That thing's breaking down fast. And this patient was only 45. It looked like that. And so the gout really took a whack at this thing because he already injured it, not adjusted enough. The joint's got to be aligned. You got to shut off the nerve receptors in the joints and line them up correctly, or they will not stop firing. I don't know how I don't understand these medical doctors say chiropractic. You don't shut off the nerves; they just keep on swelling and causing irritation, and then you get degeneration, you get thickening, you get lipping, you get spurring. I mean, they're like brain dead over there. This one right here, if you look at this, there's actually a 11 millimeter difference there. I put a lift in that one for her. She was just, there's nothing there. I'm like, oh, your back looks great. She's tipped like this. She got a short leg, a bad short leg. Hyaline cartilage tissue. This is one of the reasons we got this spine in our body. And we always think of the extremities. Yeah, the wrist has hyaline cartilage, anywhere where joints meet. But these areas where the top joint and the bottom joint of the vertebra have hyaline cartilage too. So your body's going to take out from the spine to put into the rest of the joints, or vice versa. So you got to make sure your body has a lot to feed. A lot of joints, a lot of crevices, but this is a joint here, hip joint in here. This is all hyaline cartilage along here. It's got to slide and glide. If it doesn't slide and glide, you're in trouble. This has got to slide and glide. So these are all little joints. When you get malnourished, when you're not on a good protein diet, when you're on a high carbohydrate diet, your neck is going to bother you. Your back's going to bother you. That's why I put the hyaline cartilage up there. Hyaline cartilage, the best is bronchial tubes, costal cartilage, larynx, and the trachea and the nose. So what I'm using for all the hyaline cartilage for most people is the cytosine trachea. It's the raw material to feed all the areas where the joints are slipping over each other. Because that's what it's made of. It comes from your throat. It's called trachea. So changing the environment, using the raw material. You can't make a cement out there without saying. I mean, you need the raw material. That's why like heals like. Here's some cartilage in there. These are chondrocytes that produce the cartilage. A lot of times what happens is it's nice and smooth, and then you slip it off a sidewalk, you roll it off something, now you damage it a little bit, and those fibers, little fibers in there, and those fibers are sitting there, and then now the immune system goes after those little fibers, and now you got a relentless irritation, inflammation, and deterioration. So you got to do something to change that. Glandular, that's where glandular therapy comes in. It's very important. Use glandulars just like I use trachea for hyoid cartilage. I use heart tissue for the heart. But I make sure there's the supportive growth factors to go with it, so that, because it's all about the environment. If the environment is not conducive to grow, it's not going to happen. So I make sure the environment's right and then supply the raw materials. Here's what I use. Soft tissue. Here's cytozyme trachea for raw materials. This is Gabinol Forte has been known to raise insulin growth factor 1, that one that Ketozyme does, that I use in the women. This one raises it a little bit high. And then B Vital raises it in men a little bit higher, testosterone and HGH. So that's what I use for that, for a little bit of growth hormone. Now, the same herb that you can use in women for bone density, you can use, it stimulates embryonic stem cells to actually help rebuild the heart. So anybody that's had a heart attack, anybody's had any cardiovascular problems, that's one nutrient. And I don't recommend taking the bone complex, but there's another nutrient that has that in there that somebody already thought about that put it all together. This was neat. It said when cells were co-cultured with the iacarin, which is the phytoestrogen isoflavonoid, it said the percentage of beating EB having to do with the embroid body, reached a peak level of 73%. So it actually really cranked on those cardiac cells. This is my other stimulator. And I don't have a problem. Everybody likes to put female and male things together. And yeah, I have some female and I have some male. But sometimes the females need to be on the male stuff and sometimes the males need to be on the female stuff. But it's not really a male and female thing. But we make it that way and because we like to feel unique. And this is just for men, this is just for women, all that stuff. So for heart disease, arterial diseases, bone density, assists with regeneration, increases muscle mass, and it stimulates growth hormone. So that's the Tomcat that I use for those issues. And I could very well use this on a female that has bone issues. There's two different ginsengs in there, or ginsengs. There's horny goatweed, which is exciting. Okay? And then there's tribulus in there too, which has to do with a little bit of growth hormone too. So it's a good product for growth hormone with cartilage, with ligament, with a bone tissue like BIOS, with something. So that's how I think to put things together. This was a product, you know what? There was somebody that just passed away recently, and I thought about them when I was looking through the research, but this person died from multiple myeloma. So there's not a lot of good treatments out there for multiple myeloma because there's a good treatment for 3 or 4 years and then it doesn't work anymore. So this was kind of cool. I grabbed this out of the journal, but parthenolide and andrographolide exhibit anti-cancer stem cell activity in multiple myeloma, which is kind of cool because those are two herbals that will help with, because multiple myeloma is a bone protein that's given off in the blood. And it's actually a bone cancer. So those two nutrients, so people always have to wait and see like what's going to happen with multiple myeloma. This journal alone, if I had multiple myeloma standing right here, I'd be on that. Because I know they don't have anything for it. So I put that up there just to let you know that, I'm always on the search for different ways to use things because the knowledge and the research and the money going into this is just huge. So there's a lot of different there's a lot of different tricks and things you can do to help yourself out when you have these problems. Does anybody have any questions? I want one person to come up here. I want to test somebody. I want to do one thing. You've been nominated. Come on up here for 1 second. I want to show you not only the concussion reflex that I like to do on people because you can tell what they have, but there's a specific way you can tell if a joint's regenerating or degenerating. Okay? Turn this way. What was your first name? Mark. Nice to meet you. Put this arm out. I want to show you something. Let's use this arm. Let's turn this way. Hold as strong as you can. So, good. She's got a good arm strength. Under my CRA technique that Dr. Versendahl founded probably about 50 years ago, there's a simple way to tell whether you have a structural misalignment, a degenerative problem, or supporting both would help you, or doing nothing. Okay? I want to show you. Put this arm out. Let's use her shoulder as an example. We're going to cup her shoulder, and we're going to go hold strong. See how strong that is? Good, right? Put your negative, hold strong. See how weak it is? Positive in Dr. Versendahl's technique is it needs to be adjusted. Okay? Negative on the back of the hand, the way energy runs in the body, it means degenerative. So her shoulder is in a degenerative mode right now. And I don't know nothing about it. I just know that the energy's talking, there's not a lot there, it's degenerative. So would an adjustment help her? No. That's why you gotta test it. You don't know. So if she tested positive, see how strong that is? She doesn't need an adjustment. If she goes weak, she needs that joint set because the nerve flow is not running through that shoulder, or the nerve plexus is not moving the energy like it's supposed to. If it's on the negative, and it is, because I can tell, it's terrible. She needs to be on regenerative supplement, trachea, kind of, I don't know what. You'd have to get into that a little bit more. But you can test the body like that and see how bad the injury is, just like you can see how bad the concussion is. You can check the knees. Positive, hold strong. Her right knee's perfect. This one right here is bad. So she needs that knee adjusted. She's on the negative. So she's both negative. So I would adjust that knee. She has nothing to do with regenerative in the knees right now. All she needs is her left knee adjusted. Is that interesting? I just told you a bunch of information without an MRI, what your status is, if you're acute or chronic. That's it. Okay?
Bravo.
Does anybody have any? So that's how I can tell in the office. That's the advantage I have over medical doctors, DOs. If you want to know something, your body will tell you. Okay? So I oversimplified it, but with how much regeneration and joint, I had this guy in the office, I couldn't help him. He checked, when I checked this, it was the hip joint. I couldn't help him anymore. Actually, he came in one time, first time, saw his x-ray. I went over, took the stuff over there, tested his hip joint. His hip joint tested for a 17 on the trachea. When you're over a 15, I can't help you. You need too much support. Then what I did is I took the trachea and then I used the Tomcat. And I said, wait, what about if we change the environment, put that in his hand, add the trachea to that? He went all the way from a 17 to a 9. But can I hold his hand? He's a little too far gone. I can't hold his hand and say, take your pills every day. You know, you gotta be committed. You gotta have to wanna do something. I mean, it's important. Patient responsibility is important. So I told him, listen, I can't do anything with your head. Sorry. He's only 45, he's got a hip like that. Plus there's other issues. So that's how I can tell, you know, if he's an 8, love him. 15, love you. Higher than that, I'm limited. It's too far gone. You know, there's nothing I can do unless, you know, God's grace is upon me. Okay? Any other questions? Does anybody have any questions about stem cells? I know there's a lot, and I kind of breezed through it. The main thing I wanted to focus on, there are things you can do. It's all about your stem cells and regeneration. And the fact that nutrients regenerate stem cells tells you that there's things you can do every day to help yourself heal and get better. You just got to have the knowledge to do it, and that's why I put the lecture. Okay? Anybody has any questions, stick around and I'll talk to you. Other than that, if you're a new patient, you know somebody that wants to be a new patient, have them contact the office. And then here's the thermoscan that I think will be helpful for people. Yes, well, how much was it? 110, 90?
199.
199? But there's a little brochure on it and stuff like that, but it's definitely worth it. Okay?
Question about that. Do regular doctors know about that? You know, MDs and what have you?
Some of them do. Yeah, you have to, you gotta ask them, but, yeah, we do the drawing. We'll pick 2 of them out there. Thanks for coming.